So, welcome to everyone. To those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jonathan Kessler. I am a co-chair of ADL's Young Leaders and Professionals group, along with Robert Carlton, and we are both so thrilled to see such a great turnout. We are so thankful that all of y'all decided to come to tonight's event. To those of you who are new to ADL YLP programs, we are a group of young leaders and professionals from within Houston's community, whose mission it is to provide educational events covering the numerous issues that fall under the umbrella of the Anti-Defamation League. Our goal is to bring to you expert speakers who are equipped to lead discussions of topics ranging from immigration to cyberbullying, from Holocaust education to hate speech. And we are especially pleased tonight to be joining with Congregation Emmanuel's Young Professionals group to bring you tonight's program. We say thanks to our friends from Emmanuel, who not only helped orchestrate tonight's event, but who are graciously hosting us in their beautiful chapel, which is bringing back some bar mitzvah memories. It is also my pleasure to recognize the two event co-chairs who spent countless hours, and I'm not joking about that, and provided incredible energy helping to arrange tonight's program on Hero, an issue of great importance to all of our city's diverse communities. Talia Peglis and Jamie Berkowitz ensured that tonight's panel would be comprised of speakers who not only could provide a unique perspective, but who also would bring the gravity and expertise required to discuss a topic as important as this one. But before we begin tonight's program, we would be remiss if we did not take a moment to remember the tragic events from this past Sunday. It is with great sadness that tonight's program is being held under the shadow of a horrific act of terror that was committed against the LGBTQ community in Orlando, an act that was committed out of hate. Many of y'all were handed flyers when y'all arrived today. There's a URL on there for the ADL's website where you can put your name on a letter of condolence. That letter will be sent to ADL's Florida Regional Office, who has been in contact with the leading investigative agencies as well as the LGBTQ community within South Florida, providing them resources and other assistance. When something like this happens, when an act of hate occurs, it is important that we show love and solidarity with the victims of hate, to show both them as well as those who harbor hate that we stand with equality. So if you would, please join me now for a moment of personal reflection as we think about the victims as well as their families. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of y'all for coming today. It's a great turnout. Really want to thank my esteemed panelists and moderator, who will be introduced shortly. I'm Jamie Berkowitz. I joined the ADL 2 years ago when I moved back to Houston from New Orleans. During my time living in New Orleans, I witnessed several forms and degrees of hatred, ignorance, and violence. I actually went on the NOPD website today, and I saw that during my time there were 873 murders. A lot of these crimes based on bigotry and ignorance. When I moved back to Houston, I wanted to be part of something meaningful, substantial. I wanted to make some sort of difference in the community while also enhancing my own understanding of different cultures and religions. Everything starts with education and respect. And ADL YLP is committed to educating young professionals in an effort to combat hate and promote civil rights. I urge all of you to join ADL YLP if you have not already, and join me in achieving this mission. Again, thank you for coming to tonight's panel.
All right, thank you guys for all coming, and thank you, Jamie, for being a wonderful co-chair. All right, sorry, my printer was not working, so I have to read this off my phone. Technology, all right. Hello, I'm Talia Peglis. I am the other co-chair for this event. On behalf of my wonderful co-chairs and we are honored to have George Gibson as our moderator. George Gibson has been practicing law for over 2 decades. He currently leads the litigation department of the law firm of Nathan Summers Jacobs. He is the current ADL board chair for Houston. One of the many reasons his leadership is so great for ADL, and we are so grateful to have him, is that he lets leaders lead, with his hand always out there for support and guidance. This is one of many reasons why my co-chairs and I wanted to have him as our moderator for this panel. I have witnessed his leadership firsthand through the ADL GLI class, and you will witness his leadership firsthand as he moderates this panel. Without further ado, I introduce you to George Gibson, the ADL board chair and our moderator. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on this panel. There have been a number of events this week commemorating, praying about, thinking about the massacre in Orlando. But I think that this program might be just as important as those programs, because the issues we're going to discuss today, although they relate to the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, or HERO, many of the issues that those who supported HERO fought for and will continue to fight for include respect, fighting against hate that showed itself in the worst possible way in Orlando. As a native Houstonian, I grew up here. I love this city. When the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance came about, and after Mayor Parker was elected for her 3rd term, she was elected in November of 2013, and she had stated that it was one of the things that she wanted to accomplish. And when it was introduced in 2014, through the great leadership of Mayor Pro Tem Cohen and Mayor Parker, and David Feldman, and many others on the City Council and in the community, as a native Houstonian, I felt really, really proud, and I'm still proud that it was passed. Obviously, the vote did not work out the way we wanted it to, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and I think that some of which we think we understand, or some people think they understand. I don't know if we fully understand all of them. So we're going to try to explore some of that today with our panel of experts and engage in a discussion not only amongst ourselves but with you about HERO and what it means and what its future is. But I thought I might just for a moment reflect on the testimony that the ADL gave to City Council while the fight to pass HERO in City Council, because I believe that it encapsulates, at least from ADL's perspective, why HERO is so important. ADL was founded over 100 years ago to fight against the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment for all. ADL has long known that discrimination anywhere is discrimination everywhere. All have the right to be free from discrimination based on race, age, religion, national origin, disability, or who you love, and other characteristics. In 1964, our country made a giant, even if incomplete, step forward in providing protection to many who suffer from discrimination. 2014 was the year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And since 1964, the city of Houston has been silent on civil rights, and members of our community have suffered from that silence. The ordinance exempts religious institutions, among other exemptions. The ordinance will protect those who suffer from discrimination based on a comprehensive list of characteristics that touch every single Houstonian. I repeat, every single Houstonian is touched and covered by the characteristics in the HERO ordinance. The ordinance has confidentiality provisions to allow the parties space to work issues out and the city to investigate the facts. The ordinance requires conciliation so that legal action may not be required. It is a balanced approach. The time has come for the city of Houston to join hundreds of other cities in the passage of a civil rights ordinance, including Fort Worth, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin. Those cities have remained vibrant and successful not in spite of their ordinances, but because of their commitment to the equal rights at the city level. We reject the statements of those who characterize the LGBT community as sodomists, sexual deviants, or somehow illegitimate. We reject the characterizations of those who have called the Equal Rights Ordinance a law to protect and promote sexual predators. Those who have made those statements are engaged in reprehensible hate speech, expose their bigotry, and it is incumbent on all fair-minded citizens to call them out and not remain silent. Houston is the most diverse city in the nation, and we must protect and celebrate that diversity for the good of our neighbors, the good of our children, the good of our economy, and in the pursuit of justice and fair treatment for all. All of those principles, I believe, still apply today. Our community still needs the Equal Rights Ordinance. I look forward to discussing with the panel exactly why that is, and hopefully educate some of you, and we can have a community discussion about where we go from here. It's really ridiculous, frankly, that somehow this ordinance was defeated here in Houston, largely on the backs of a campaign that stoked fear and hatred and lies about a segment of our community. Again, as a native Houstonian, not only as an ADL board member, it's completely reprehensible to me. And so let's hope that these community meetings can foster a discussion so that the next time HERO comes up, and I believe there will be a next time, we will be better prepared. We'll be better prepared to fight hate. We'll be better prepared to fight for those who need our help. After we have a chance to visit with our panelists for a few minutes, each one of you has on your chair a card and a pencil for you to write any questions that you would like to submit. Our sponsors here will help collect those as the evening goes on, and then we'll hopefully have time to ask some of your questions. I'm sure we won't get to all of them or nearly all of them, but please submit them, and and we'd like to involve you in our discussion and make it more vibrant. Mayor Pro Tem Cohen, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Are there any plans to reintroduce the HERO ordinance? And, if so, when? If not, why? And what are your comments on it?
Well, I can't speak for the mayor as to what his plans are. Just to give you a quick look as how these things happen, so that the only way something can be voted on by city council is if it's on the agenda. And the only way it gets on the agenda is if the mayor puts it there. So that's how ordinances are brought to us. If it's up to me, yes, the Equal Rights Ordinance will see the light of day again. The only caveat to that is it's not going to happen right away. We've got some things on our plate. Not that they're more important, but we've got to deal with the pensions. We have to focus on some of that. But the fact of the matter is, it's quite likely that the Supremes up in D.C., all 8 or maybe 9 one of these days, all 8 and 9 will decide this issue because it's being brought up. It was in Houston, but the fact of the matter is there are a number of states that have already passed similar hate ordinances. And of course, our legislature meets in January, and I'm sure they're going to see this as really important and critical to their decision making. So it's possible we'll pass something horrible this session. So it's equally possible that it'll get to the Supreme Court before, in the next year or two. So I intend to get involved.
What would be your commentary or observations? You worked so hard to get the ordinance through the city council, writing it, making it fair and complete. How did you, when you observed the campaign come out and the vote come out, what did you think about how the ordinance was being discussed in our community, how that related to the reality of what's
let me say, Mayor Parker asked me to be the whip for the ordinance. And that meant that I had to speak, in total we're 17. Of course, I didn't speak to myself, and I didn't have to speak to Mayor Parker. So there were 15 of us we had to convince. And let's be really clear, it passed City Council. It was in effect for a period of months before it went to the public and before it was voted down. Now that said, there were 6 council members who voted against it. 6 council members. And at the time, we had 3 openly gay members on City Council. So it was really shocking to hear some of the things that were being said while their colleagues were sitting next to them around the horseshoe. I can't say what went wrong, except that making people afraid and making them hate something sells more than logic. And I think part of that was we felt once people understand what this is all about, it's a slam dunk. People will vote for it. Once you put out a video that's grainy black and white and shows a tall man walking into a bathroom behind a little girl. And let me add, I spent 18 years as the CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center, which provides services for domestic and sexual violence survivors. And I can tell you, in the history of the Houston Area Women's Center, we never counseled one child or adult woman who was ever assaulted in a bathroom by a male. If you want to be afraid of a perpetrator, be afraid of the person who lives across the street, be afraid of the uncle, be afraid of the scoutmaster. Those are the people who perpetrate sexual assaults on children, and not members of the GLBTQ community.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We're very fortunate to have Dr. James Douglas. Dr. Douglas has been a stalwart in our community for quite some time. He's the president of the local chapter of the NAACP. The NAACP and Dr. Douglas in particular were strong proponents of HERO, and we appreciate that alliance. And Dr. Douglas has also been teaching law at TSU for quite some time and been an administrator, so we're very lucky to have him. Thank you. Dr. Douglas, one of the criticisms that we heard was that, well, there's already federal protection. There's already federal civil rights laws. Why do we need this here in Houston? Can you speak to how this ordinance fits and what it adds to our community that the federal laws don't?
Yeah, one of the things that I always tell my students is that the law is for your client what the highest court you can get to says the law is. So, assuming you have a legal matter, you're in a trial court, you have a judge that doesn't understand the rule of law, and they misapply the law. Now, if your client doesn't have the resources to appeal it, the law is what the trial court says the law is. And that's somehow where we are today. We have a lot of federal statutes. But back in the 60s, in the early 70s, when the court was not as conservative as it is today, lawyers would take discrimination lawsuits on a contingency basis, meaning you don't have to pay me until we win, and then the court will force the defendant to pay my fees. You can't win a discrimination lawsuit today. And so most lawyers require cash, money. I'll take your case if you're willing to pay my fees. Most people who are discriminated against are not in a financial position to pay legal fees. So even though you may have a right to a lawsuit, you don't have the financial resources to even get to court. And if you get to court, courts now are so conservative, the likelihood of winning is extremely remote. One of the good things about the ordinance was that if you were discriminated against under HERO, you didn't have to pay anything. All you had to do was go down, file a complaint with the city, and the city would then pursue your remedy under HERO. And so we've taken taken away, even though people say we had all these federal rights, and they are on paper, but in actuality, they don't really exist.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Lou Weaver is here with us, and he is the Transgender Programs Coordinator at Equality Texas, and we're very happy to have you here for your perspective. The bathroom narrative that came out in the campaign created an enormous amount of fear and anxiety. What information from your perspective do you think needs to be shared with the community to be prepared for the next time? We all, many of us are allies, if you will. It will come, and it will pass, and we will get it. But it appears that there needs to be some education. The 63%, roughly, of the community voted against it. That's an enormous amount. That is shocking, frankly. And it showed a lot of ignorance, because even the hateful fear shouldn't have reached that many people. We do have a lot of haters in our community, but I think we have a lot of fair-minded people who maybe just weren't quite as educated as they could be and can be turned. That's a personal opinion. I don't have a political science degree to back that up, but I feel like that there's a big chunk that can get turned. From your perspective and your training and experience, how should we be communicating these issues to more or less introduce the transgender community to the rest of us?
So, in my opinion, what happened, and this is my opinion only, even though I am wearing an Equality Texas name tag right now, when we started going to City Hall, and I was there every Tuesday and Wednesday for public comment, and then listen to City Council for 10 and 12 hours a day, and we were having our talks, and we were telling people who the transgender community is. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a transgender man. They told my parents I was a girl. I spent 38 years living as a female, and now I get to live my truth and be here in front of you as Lou Weaver male, even recognized by the great state of Texas as that. We did not do enough education. It was very simple for the opposition to say no men in women's restrooms. They have a 5-word statement that they can slap on a billboard, slap on a bumper sticker, and run with it. It takes me much longer to explain who my community is. Even though I can tell you I was born female and I live as a man, some of you are still going, I have no idea what he just said to me, right? I'm honest, right? This is some weird stuff. And if you haven't heard this before, for me to be able to have this conversation, it's probably going to take me at a bare minimum of 20 minutes to explain to you who I am and what this means, and the fact that when I go out in the public and I need to use a restroom, all I want to do is walk into the restroom, use the facilities, wash my hands, and walk out. But when somebody is saying something to you that activates your lizard brain right here, and you freak out, it takes me twice as long to recount what anything somebody has said to you that activates your lizard brain, that is saying fight or flight. You have to fight me or you have to run away from me. And in this situation, you were told to fight me. You were told to fight my community. So they started their campaign when we were down at City Hall saying no men in women's restrooms. This is what this is going to lead to. And we started having conversations. And then when it passed on May 28th of 2014, we went into a very much of a silo and very much of a quiet space. We didn't do enough then to continue having conversations with the broader Houston community, those that have no idea who a transgender person is, about who the transgender communities are, and that we live here, that we walk among you, we visit the same grocery stores, we visit the same congregations, we see you everywhere. But some of us are invisible. Nobody cares about me. I'm all of a 5'7" short guy. I blend into Houston, right? But I am not visibly trans. And that comes with a lot of privilege and a lot of erasure on my part. People don't see me. Who they do see sometimes are transgender women, because testosterone is a powerful drug. And if somebody's gone through puberty with testosterone and they have a collar, have bigger hands, bigger feet, an Adam's apple, things like this, then they have a tendency to stand out. And we have been taught as a culture, women have been taught, and men, if you don't believe this, that's fine. Go listen to a woman and actually listen to her. That she has been, I promise you, we can also talk about male privilege, the things that you folks don't agree with, right? Women have been taught their entire life to fear men. Don't walk anywhere alone, go in a group, have your keys out, where is your mace, and what are you wearing? And you are taught that as a female-identified person from the time you are this high. So it's very easy at this point to tell any woman, you should be afraid of somebody. And we as men need to protect you. Now I think that's a bunch of crap, but that is how our society has been programmed to think and programmed to function for the past 50, 60 years, if not longer. I'm all of 47, so I make some of the stuff up, right? It happens, right? But so when we talk about this and we don't do enough of explaining, And we talk about the LGBT community maybe being 10% of the population. And with the transgender population being about roughly 0.3 to 1% of the population, depending on who you're talking to. And the transgender population has been told over and over again that you transition, you cut your ties, and you don't talk about your life because either you can lose your family, you can lose your job, and sometimes you lose your God. That's a whole lot. I should have asked like 20 minutes ago. That's a whole lot.
You already said crap. Whatever.
Oh, I did say crap. Sorry. The S word comes out frequently. Sorry. That's why I don't get to go out in public very often, right?
The rabbi is counting, by the way.
Yeah.
Ark's closed. We're fine.
Okay, good. Right? Sorry. Right? That's a whole lot of stuff going on. And when you're terrified that you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your job, and then we are taught in America, no matter which God you worship, that God is always going to show up for you. And yet there's people talking from a pulpit, reading the Bible against you, and that God will disown you. And these are very real stories that happen to a lot of people. You're terrified, so it's impossible to come out. And so transgender folks do not come out. They are not okay. I come with a lot of privilege. I'm going to walk out of here, I'm going to go home, I have a roof over my head, I have food in my refrigerator, and I have a dog who loves me, and I have a job. That is a lot of privilege. Not every transgender person has that. And for them to say, I am a transgender person, there's instant looks of like, oh, gross, and I don't want to talk to you, and you're no longer my friend, and you're a sinner. And so when we don't have enough people being able to come out and share who they are, it's very easy for us to be targeted. And that is exactly what happened. Even though not once in their campaign did they say the word transgender, we knew exactly who they were talking about when they said men and women's dresses, and we don't have an answer. As an LGBTQ community, as a civil rights community, we don't have enough answers to be able to say, as a transgender man, I seriously just want to go about the life. I am a proud Texan. I was not born here. I got here as fast as I could. And I want to, that's what I'm programmed to say, right? I want to be able to go to work, provide for my family, and not cause a problem. I have strong Texas values. That takes me 5 minutes. And I haven't even told you what it means to be transgender. No women, no men in women's bathrooms. 5 words. And you're terrified. And that's why they won. And it's going to take us a long time, and it's going to take a lot of education to combat that narrative.
See why we asked him to be here?
May I
I'm
say
the comic
something on
relief.
on that issue?
Please.
And it's funny because I talk to a lot of people about that ad, that commercial, and I said the commercial has absolutely nothing to do with Hero. I say even if you defeat Hero, what happened in that commercial can happen because you didn't even have a transgender going into the ladies' room.
No, some
You
guy
had a man
Who would be arrested
dressed
if it
as a
happened
man
today.
Right.
going into the ladies' room.
Right.
Had
That's right.
absolutely
Nothing.
nothing to do with the ordinance.
It is now and always will be a crime to walk into a restroom in order to commit some sort of assault. And it has been on the books in Houston for a very long time.
No matter who commits it.
That's
No
right.
matter who commits it.
Right.
And I tell
what
you,
you're wearing.
I'm gonna tell you a funny story. It's true. Talking to a law faculty, and I'm going, look, man, it's happening every day. You don't even know when transgenders go into the ladies' room. Oh, I know them. I know them. I said, no, you don't. He said, yes, I do. I said, you remember Phyllis?
Right.
Phyllis Fry.
He said, yeah. I said, well, Phyllis. He said, no, you lying. I said, no. It has been a whole semester because he taught at the law school. She taught at the law school one semester. He didn't even know. So a lot of times it's ignorance that leads us to positions of, of hate. Most people
No
hate
doubt.
out of ignorance.
We're also very fortunate that Congregation Emmanuel is hosting us here today, and we appreciate it. And we're very lucky to have Rabbi Samantha Colin here with us from Congregation Bakke Decision. I'm sorry, Emmanuel. Thank you. Woo. She's the assistant rabbi here at Congregation Emmanuel. And you came from Florida, is that right? Okay,
Miami born and bred.
good. Well, we're glad you're here now.
Thank you.
Rabbi, as Lou mentioned, there is a definite religious undertone to much of the debate over this civil rights issue. And although hero, we're going to spend most of our time here talking about LGBT, even though hero does so much more than that. I mean, that's a tiny little subset of what hero does, but it's been the big issue that has come up. And in particular, after the defeat here in Houston, across the country, we've now had these religious freedom bills that have come up, and they're probably going to come up in Texas next year. They've come up every year in Texas, but I think next year it's going to come up with a lot of ferocity. But people make a religious argument, and they state that, well, my religion frowns upon that community, thinks they're sinners, thinks they're evil, whatever they think, and for me to have to tolerate them somehow violates my religion. Can you, specifically within Judaism, because obviously that's what you're an expert in, but just as a clergy in general, can you speak to how we can best communicate to not only other clergy that might be in opposition to hero, but also to their congregants, to their adherents, as to how to explain how there is plenty of room with being a religious person, but also accepting something like hero?
Absolutely. It's hard because there's so many different things that are said in the Torah, in the Bible, if you're not Jewish, that I've often told my teenagers when they're trying to make arguments in religious school, that you can argue any point if you take a verse out of context. You can make any case for any issue on either side of any issue. The question of religion is what is the sense of it? What is the context? And what is the meaning behind it? And I cannot stand the religious indignation of people who say that religion is in any way against the LGBTQ community. It's not. But I'm going to take a step before that and say, I think that it is a foundational principle. We are told in the beginning of the Torah that humankind is created, that Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and that every one of us is created unique and beautifully in God's image. And anyone, anywhere, who tries to diminish that beautiful image of God in anyone else is already doing wrong. And that's a foundational principle. So no matter what else happens later with the stories of how do you make this work and how do you live with this society, that should not be undone. And that goes for all of hero. Hero, equal rights. I cannot imagine it. It is very hard as a rabbi to see any person of any faith speak against equal rights. I think that's one of the downfalls. I think that's one of the downfalls of the people of why the argument failed for so many of us who believe that, is because it seemed obvious. It seemed logical. Like, what are you talking about? We don't have to defend equal rights. They're equal rights. But of course, as it's been said, fear can really can be more powerful than logic sometimes, unfortunately. But I also think that religion itself, if you look at it, and I can speak specifically about Jewish religion, even if you want to single out the trans community, there is nothing against the trans community. And I will challenge anyone who says otherwise. The verses that people quote that say you shouldn't dress other, they're talking about, if you look at the context, they're talking about monogamy and adultery, and they're talking about these bigger contexts. The other thing it says when it says that human is created in the image of God is Genesis 1, verse 27, says the first Adam, the first person is created, male and female, they are created. The verse says that this first human being was non-gender conforming. That this was a non-binary gender. That this was male and female together. Rabbis throughout history have played with this, have said, is it someone who was one or the other or both or neither or what's going on? And the truth is that's there. And if you just look at it, just read it. Like, say that to a preacher who's yelling at you. And also in Judaism, again, it says that same amazing, powerful verse. Everyone go look at it. Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27. not only does it say created as man and woman, created in the image of God, but that implication of the image of God means that also God's gender is non-binary in the Bible and in Judaism. And it doesn't become seen as male until generations later when a group of men, rabbis, are sitting around trying to make sense of things and they use male language. But if you look at the text, the names of God in the Torah, the names of God, and the way it's understood, you have female and masculine names side by side used interchangeably. We have Shekhinah, this beautiful presence that dwells with us, which is a name of God. And we also have this idea of knowledge, the God of knowledge, when you're really praying for knowledge. That I kind of love that one's female, but that but that it's female. But it's not until much later that humanity made it make more sense for them in a way that they could make it make sense. So I'd say if there's ever anyone who tries to say religiously this is wrong, you say, I would like to talk to you about that. Because not only is that not accurate, but again, nothing that ever diminishes the humanity of anyone could ever be what God wants. Any God.
Wow. Remember that if you have questions that come up about anything, please write them down on your card, and our leaders here will help pick those up. I want to address this to the entire panel, and let's just engage in a discussion of different viewpoints. In the HERO ordinance, there were a number of covered areas. It covered city employment and city services, non-discrimination in city employment and city services, non-discrimination in city contracting, non-discrimination in public accommodations, private employment, and also fair housing. Most of those are pretty does everyone understand what public accommodations are? Is there anybody that doesn't understand what public, okay. So public accommodations mean that when you open up a business or some property, primarily it's usually business to the public. In other words, you say, I'm going to open up a convenience store, or I'm going to open up a restaurant, or I'm going to open up a hotel, and you are going to allow the public, in other words, people that aren't members of a club or subscribers to your services, or somehow a member of who you are, if you're just going to let anybody come in off the street, that makes you a public accommodation. And one of the things that was established in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which under federal law, you could not discriminate in public accommodation. By the way, historically, that was a huge deal when that act was passed, because there were people, and primarily African Americans, but of other races too, Jews as well, that couldn't travel across country very easily. They had to sleep in their cars on the side of the road because motels and hotels would not cater to them, period, full stop. So that was a really big part of it. The Houston Civil Rights Ordinance covers all these, again, city services, employment, city contracting, public accommodations, private employment, and fair housing. All of the debate that I heard, perhaps there were some, dealt with the public accommodation provision. The public accommodation provision is where the bathroom issue comes in, okay? I didn't hear any debate, really, about any of the others. So why don't we just not go with public accommodation right now? Why don't we cover what we can? Why don't we drop back and say, that's controversial, let's pass the rest of it today, this summer. Let's do it and get what we can. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
In my opinion, that's an absolute cop-out. That's like saying, going back to what you were talking about, well, let's allow Jews in this hotel and let's allow Hispanics in this hotel, but blacks cause a lot of problems, so let's take blacks out of that equation and we'll get it passed. Or let's take women out of the equation and get it passed. Public accommodations is what it's all about. It's about saying, I have a restaurant and anyone who can pay my food bill can come in, provided they're not coming in without shoes, and then you can still have regulations. But by the way, I do want to add one thing. The whole issue of HERO came up before quality of life, and I'm chairman of quality of life. So I know how many hours of testimony we had, and there were people, I'm clearly not the numbers, but there were people who testified about the issue, in other words, other than being GLBTQ. We had people come up and say, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu. We had people come up and say, I'm a senior. We had people come up and say, if you vote this down, we had veterans, because it covers veterans. If you vote this down, you're voting it down, you're voting me and what I'm looking for down. But I think, in my opinion, HERO failed to pass the community. Again, it passed city council. It failed to pass the community because there were a lot of religious leaders of very large congregations who spewed hate from the pulpit. And they got their parishioners out to vote. And they scared people. And I don't think, quite honestly, the trans part was the issue as much as, in total, the LGBTQ was the issue. People that oppose rights for gays said, we'll go after it through the back door, through the issue of bathrooms. We don't want gays, period. And this is a way we can go after it. I would make the analogy to Roe v. Wade. You know, we passed Roe v. Wade X number of years ago. We said it's passed, we went like this, we said that's great. And it's been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And as far as I'm concerned, it's those people that have real issues with the gay community, and this was a way to go at it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Why don't we cut back? Why don't we carve bathrooms out? Why don't we change it?
You know, I thought about it. I agree with Ellen. I thought about it because I used to teach a course called Black Jurisprudence. It's a jurisprudential look at all of the major Supreme Court cases that affected African Americans starting back with slavery. You mentioned the Civil Rights Bill of 1964. When the whole concept to defeat segregation was started, it didn't begin with integration. If you look at the early cases going back to the 1920s, it was the plan was to slowly chip away because African Americans realized there was no way you could attack integration. Even when you look at integration of public schools in 1954, Brown decision, I always tell people, I don't know if you've heard of Sweat v. Painter. That's the lawsuit that created Thurgood Marshall School of Law, because the decision was made, we're going to have to integrate higher education before we can integrate public education. So it was a theory because, and I think we're a lot better off with the LGBTQ community now and the issues that it provides, but it depends on where you are in the spectrum. And I think what Ellen says is true, because I think we're close enough to win that we don't have to start, eliminating certain aspects of the ordinance.
Yeah, so I would also like that. I think, I've been thinking about so much what you said about how long it takes to communicate your story, but I think the truth is our message could be just as simple. It could be, vote against hate, vote for equality. And those languages, I think you don't want to say we're taking these people out because only some people deserve protection. I want to know when it came to be that the people who deserved protection or got protection were only however many names and words you listed and added to the these are all in. No, if you say equal rights, that should just assume everybody. That's the whole point of equality.
Right, but the thing is, if we go forward and we get public employment, we get private employment, and we get some of these other things, housing, we will never be able to go back and get public accommodations. It is so hard to add something after the fact. And I will tell you, I was on a call today, and we haven't had a major win since 2007. So before I finish on that thought, my other thought, one of the most horrible things that I listened to when I was at City Council in 2014 was when a minister's wife, she's a co-minister, not just a minister's wife, she actually is a minister, told at the time council member Ellen Cohen that she... Okay.
Do we know what's happening? That does not seem to be something I can shut off. Give me 1 second.
Do we need to leave?
There's an exit right there. Everybody come this way. We'll come right back as soon as I check on it, okay? Joe, will you go to the front desk and see? It's the alarm panel right there. I can't shut off. I'm going to bring them under the so that I keep talking.
Yeah. So now we're awake. Yeah. Okay. So, Lou.
We ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Getting everyone back in, sorry.
That's what I get for bringing up a co-minister and Ellen Cohen in the middle of a Jewish temple. My apologies. This is a temple chapel, and I'm going to get the Torah versus the Bible. So what I actually witnessed was this woman, this co-minister, badgering the council member, and the council member saying, "Are you saying I should be discriminated against because I'm Jewish?" Like, no, that's not what we're talking about. Actually, yes, it is. Well, then, yes, I should be able to discriminate against you because you're Jewish. 2014, and I am standing in the city hall of one of the largest cities in the United States, and a professed Christian woman who's leading a church tells the entire city, and a Jewish woman, that she should be allowed to discriminate because she worships a different God. That was one of the worst things I heard. People will tell us that we can go back, if we take out public accommodations, we can have this. We're hearing this right now. But that, again, is telling us we're separate but equal. I can have all of these rights, but which bathroom do I have to go into? I will tell you what, I have been terrified of restrooms since I was little. When I came out 8 years ago as a transgender man, and I would have to sit there and think, and I'm not the only one, I know I have tons of other friends who do this, which bathroom am I going to go into and be safe right now? I've had to take other people in the bathroom with me. If somebody says no men and women's restrooms, and yet they want to check my birth certificate and send me into a bathroom, where do you think that they want to send me based on my genitalia? Okay, my birth certificate still has an F, even though I was born in California, I'm just lazy. But I want to tell you seriously, I was born in a liberal state, I could go get it changed, I'm just lazy. Because I don't think it should matter. I'm going to go in, I'm going to use facilities, I'm going to wash my hands, I'm going to walk out. But I can tell you when we knew we were going to lose. June 26th of last year, what happened? Same-sex marriage became legal in the law of the land. The opposition had a huge, huge loss and a huge fail. And they had been having some wins, some losses, some wins, some losses, and after Prop 8 and all of these things coming down, but they could still claim victories. Until last year, the Supreme Court, when there was 9 of them, and they were able to decide, nope, we're done. We don't care. Marriage is marriage. And anybody, we can all go get married. Almost a year ago. The opposition cannot fight same-sex marriage anymore. They needed a new fight. And the new fight became the transgender community because we're unknown. It's a galvanizing base. Because how else is the opposition to equality going to get their money and going to get their donations? They have to find somebody for you to hate. And it's between the trans folks, broader LGBT folks. But, they're getting married, so there's less and less we can take away from them. Even though I can still be fired, I can still be denied health care, and a lot of other things based on my sexual orientation. Or we can target the Muslims. That kind of sort of doesn't work so well-ish, does. But these trans folks, they're scary. And that's when we knew no matter what we did, especially on this shortened, right? The Supreme Court of Texas reached down and took this thing out of order. We were not supposed, and we were complacent, and that is all on our fault, right? We stopped our story, and they reached down out of order and said, hey, let's go throw this on the ballot. Let's have something to do because of who we voted into the Supreme Court, which is a bunch of Republicans, and they wanted to win. And they got one because they wanted to fight back against some sort of move forward for the LGBTQ community. Because there is this thought process that if somebody else becomes equal, then my rights become less. Whether it's a man saying, oh, a woman makes as much as me, I'm not okay with that. Whether it's a white person saying, oh, that black person can have the same job as me, how much trouble has Barack Obama had for the past 8 years as a president? Oh, wait, all those gays and queers, and I love the word queer, right? All those gays and queers are now equal to me? Ooh, I'm not up here anymore. We're like this. This causes problems in our world here in the United States. And by our world, I simply mean the United States of America, because other people don't have the same issues. And I tell you, when I went to Canada last year, they didn't care who went in the bathroom as long as you washed your hands. I promise you. That thing doesn't like me.
She'll take care of it.
We can talk over it.
I can.
By the way, according to what the language is and what they want, is that Lou should have to go into a woman's bathroom to use the facilities. Tell me something, women in this room. Wouldn't he scare the hell out of you if he showed up in the bathroom?
Scare the hell out of me. She said hell, I didn't even...
I mean, really. It's unbelievable. And think about trans women. In other words, women, born men who now look like women and are women, going into men's bathrooms because that's how they were born. You know how dangerous that is for a woman, for a person?
So let's try to broaden this out towards the civil rights discussion in general, because that's clearly what HERO was. There's been a series over the last several years of victories and defeats. We've clearly had in the same-sex marriage decision a clear victory. Here in Houston, we had a clear defeat. The Voting Rights Act was a clear defeat several years ago. Thank you. Yeah. The Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County case was defeated several years ago, or not defeated, but gutted. Just a quick primer on the Voting Rights Act is that the beauty of the Voting Rights Act that it says that no state, city, voting entity can discriminate based upon race or any other characteristics. They've got to let everyone who's eligible to vote, vote. No poll taxes, no tests, no anything else. But that's Section 2, and that entails going to a lawsuit. And as Dr. Douglas said, that takes forever. And, I mean, literally years. In the meantime, you've got fraudulent elections going on that are hurting people. The pre-clearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act were the key. They are sometimes called the most powerful civil rights tool ever conceived in the history of man. The pre-clearance provisions that required certain jurisdictions that had a history of discrimination, that whenever they're going to change their voting laws, they had to go to the Department of Justice before they were enacted in order to get and let the Department of Justice say, yeah, this is neutral, this is fine, you can do this, which is mostly what the Department of Justice said. Sometimes, however, the Department of Justice got to say, no, that's discriminatory, and then they go to a lawsuit, but at least the discriminatory voting rights law is not being enacted. Did I get that generally right, Doctor?
Got it.
Okay. So that was a huge defeat, huge defeat. We've had a number of back and forth. Where do you see the struggles for civil rights, not just among the LGBT community, but for women, but for minorities, for voting? Are we ever going to get the Voting Rights Act fixed? Where do you see that going in the near term?
You know, it's funny. We have a lot of work to do. Every now and then, I pull out a commentary that I did in 1976. And it was a commentary that was made on the day that the Supreme Court rendered the Bakke Decision. State Bakke versus California. It was a medical school admissions case. And I analogized the period between about 1865 and 1880, the period that a lot of us call Reconstruction, because that was a period of time when the rights of African Americans was at its highest before 1891, when we got into this separate but equal and legal segregation. And I analogized that between 1960 and 1976 and said that that was the second Reconstruction and that we were headed back to the vision. So I'm not surprised at what's happening now, because I predicted it back in 1976 that we were going to become a more divided country, because I could see us making that turn. And you can see that all the good that came out of the late 50s and the 60s being reversed. And so it's going to take a lot of effort to get us back to where we were in the 1960s. I mean, we see it now, even in all over the country. This has become a much more hate-filled country than we were in the 60s. I think in the 60s, people cared for each other. I think a lot of that caring is gone.
Anybody else? Where are we going with the overall civil rights struggle? Any other comments?
I guess I don't feel, I understand what you're saying, Jim, but, you know, I also look at the fact that we've had an African-American male. We may have a female president. I think that what we face is what Lou was saying, and I think that those of us who are privileged are afraid of losing those privileges and those positions in life, and that's why we're where we are right now. But I honestly believe that I'm an optimist. I mean, let me just give you an example, though. I'll bet most of the people sitting here, most of the people are young people sitting here today, and I'll bet you issues around GLBTQ issues really aren't a part of your concerns. You went to school with gay people, you work with gay people, you're married to gay people, you are gay, your family's gay, whatever, everybody is somebody you know who's gay. The fact of the matter is, in the last election in Houston, the average age of voters in the last election was 68. The average age of Houstonians is 34. You're not voting. You're the ones that care about these issues. You get it. We need you to get out and vote to make the difference.
That's perfect. That's perfect. We're going to turn to some questions from the audience, and there's one that I think is really critical, and it's really, really difficult. I don't think that we're going to solve it today, but let's explore it. And it comes between the when do religious liberties and religious rights, because we an ADL as an institution is a strong religious liberty organization. We fight for people's rights to practice their religion, however they see it. It's a major part of what we do. We believe in it very, very strongly. ADL is not an anti-religion organization by any shape of the word. And people have their rights to worship as they want to. But we also have the rest of our civil rights. And when does one person's right to religious liberty start conflicting with another person's right to personal liberty, to personal freedoms and equal rights and civil rights? And there are certain situations where those can conflict. How do we reconcile that? How do we deal with that? It's the baker, with the gay wedding cake. How do we, deal with those issues in a way that respects both sides? Any comments?
I would say, as a non-religious person, even though I'm sitting here with my kippah, it was really important to me, that once you walk into some place, wherever you work, you have to leave some of your personal business at home. Right? I don't like a lot of people, but when I walk out in public, I have to pretend I like most people. Otherwise, I'm not, I'm going to end up in jail, right? There's certain rules and there's certain mores that we follow. And we should be following these. I think the rabbi said it when we're supposed to be practicing love, and we're supposed to be practicing all of this stuff. If you go down to the basis of almost every religion, except for the one that I probably shouldn't mention because that thing will go off again, right? That,
Please don't.
I'm not. That scares me, right? And I'm not scared of a lot. But we follow these social mores on how we're supposed to treat everybody. But somewhere along the line, and it's been many years, most of the wars that we fight are based on religious freedoms. Right? The Spanish Inquisitions, you can name all of them, the Crusades. But when you go out in public, those personal things are not supposed to, I can worship however I want in my house. But when I leave my house, if that is going to step on somebody else's liberty or say, no, don't come near me because, you're purple or you worship a different god, then that's wrong. I mean, therein lies most of the problems we've had around the world in the past, I don't know, how many centuries?
No, I actually, I think it would be nice if the world worked like that everyone was like, okay, do your own thing at home and just, respect everyone publicly. That takes me back to, early Enlightenment, when Reform Judaism first started in Germany. That's what they said. They were like, okay, I'll be a Jew in my home, and then I'll just be a person out on the street. And there was so many problems with that, why do you have to hide who you are when you're out on the street? Why do you have to hide who you are ever? And I think that there's a difference between people's rights and people's insecurities, and that we should be able to call a spade and say that these things are not created equal, that you saying that your discomfort should in any way trump someone else's right to equality is ridiculous. And I agree that I know ADL is very big proponents of letting anyone practice their religion as they see fit. But ADL is also a huge proponent of trying to make sure that the government doesn't intervene in religious things. To say, there's a lot of religious organizations, for example, after 9/11, who took grants and money from, the national government for security. And nationally, I remember ADL saying, I'm not taking the government's money for my private thing. That kind of thing, it's really hard because we want the money. You want the help. You want the protection. You want... It's not just you.
What I do at home.
Sorry. Anyway, we'll go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me if I yell loud enough? We had this come up all the time during the hearings. I have a bakery, and a gay couple comes in and wants me to bake a cake, and on the top of it have the picture of have 2 men. I don't want to do that. It's against my faith. How is that different than what happened in Nazi Germany in 1938 when Jews were told you can't go in here and you can't shop over there, and pretty soon we were wearing yellow stars. If you cater to the public, you cater to the public. If you want to open a bakery here in this temple, religious institutions are exempt. Open your bakery in a temple.
So, why do you think the reaction in our community hasn't quite been as the outcry after Hero failed hasn't quite been the same as what we've seen, for example, in Indiana when they tried to pass a Religious Freedom Act that would have impinged on others' rights, and in North Carolina and in Georgia? There's been the business community coming in and saying they're going to pull out from Super Bowls, and they're going to pull out call centers, and they're going to do things that would impact the economy of the community very negatively in order to politically stop what was going on. Sure. Here we had the business community very strongly behind Hero, very strongly, but there hasn't been the outcry. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I saw them sensitive.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
And then we can continue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Janice is here. Thank you.